It seems to me that outside ideology, we should be able to agree on a lot in society. I think we can all probably agree that there should be some sort of societal floor beneath which you cannot fall without us collectively as a society stepping in to rescue you and help you back onto your feet. I think we disagree on ways to go about doing that, how much we should provide, when, where and how, but I think we can all agree that we don't really want anybody to be homeless. We don't really want anybody to be hopelessly addicted to drugs with no recourse to any way to get out of it. We don't want anybody to die unnecessarily. We don't want any children to starve unnecessarily, which has been the big issue here in the UK at the moment. So where's the sticking point? I think it's the extent of when and how much and where, and ideas that if we do provide for people, that it somehow saps their motivation or makes them not want to get up and out and do anything. And I don't think that's true. But what should we be providing for people? I guess we could start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The most important thing is shelter, really. The basic needs: food, water, and shelter. Shelter usually comes accompanied by those other things. We want to make sure everyone's fed, able to get good clean water, and has somewhere to shelter, to stay, to live. And many of these have knock-on impacts beyond the person that they directly affect. Food, for example. If a child is undernourished, malnourished, it can have a long-term effect on their development, their intelligence quotient, and starvation, or the threat of it, the need or the desire for food, shelter, water, the necessities of life, a few simple luxuries. These are the things that most often drive people to crime, and this is known. There is a link between poverty and crime. Some people point out a link between lower IQ and crime, and many racists use the supposed 1, 2, maybe 3 points of IQ difference between racial clades, whom they haven't examined closely enough or controlled for other factors in. They see that as being disastrous. And yet these same people are often dead set against any kind of help for the poor. Though if you're concerned about 1, 2 or 3 points of IQ difference between different groups, then you should be a lot more concerned about malnutrition, which can cause up to 15 points of IQ difference. So we definitely should find some way to ensure that everyone has access at least to the basics: food, water and shelter. No? I mean, shelter in particular has a knock-on effect, because if you have an address, it's easier to access help. You have somewhere things can be mailed to. If you have shelter, maybe you have access to a phone or the internet. The simple address helps homeless people so much more than just about anything else. Providing that seems like a no-brainer. And it is a no-brainer in many countries. Shelter by itself isn't necessarily enough. We need to provide support. But building dedicated shelters to help homeless people out of homelessness and hopelessness and back into life can be accompanied by providing support workers, creating small communities of homeless people where you can provide on-site assistance with addiction, bureaucracy, mental health issues, other health issues, somewhere central that doctors and so on can come to. Now, Finland has almost entirely eradicated homelessness. And I'm not saying everywhere is in the same situation as Finland, obviously being in the far north and temperatures dropping well below zero. Shelter for homeless people is incredibly important, more important than usual when it comes to Finland. But still, their solution has been a great deal of public housing and specialist public housing to help people out of homelessness. There's one place in Rukila, 21 tenants on site, 7 staff to assist them, help them through bureaucracy, make sure they can get all the access to all the aid and help, job applications, navigation of bureaucracy, everything that they need. And it sounds expensive, and it is. It does cost a lot of money to set up social housing, particularly specialist social housing, but that's an upfront cost. Finland spent about 250 million euros since about 2008, has cut its homelessness by about 35% across the country, more in Helsinki, where it's the biggest problem, but it saves around 15,000 euros per year per homeless person in housing. So reduced homelessness across the board saves a lot of money in a long ongoing process and puts people back into being contributing members of society. Not all the savings are obvious, but if you get people in off the street, if you give them access to care, you save money in emergency medical funding, policing, and many other things, and again, they become more productive, tax-paying members of society. If you have someone in shelter, you have access to them, you can then provide them food, water, phone, email, all the things that you might need to get training, to apply for jobs, to have a home address and get back on the ladder. Food security is helped by that, but it's also a problem that's less easily solved than shelter. You want people to get food, but you don't want them to spend any money you assign to that food on other things, like drugs or drink. When it comes to children, you can centralise this somewhat through schools by providing meals, including breakfast, and that will have a massive knock-on effect on attention in class, nutrition, long-term health, long-term intelligence and attainment, and helps compensate when it comes to families that aren't necessarily so well off in the same environment as families that are more well off and have better access to food. So providing food can create greater equality, can equalise opportunity, can give poorer kids more of a chance because you can ensure that they get that basic nutrition, which helps them grow into their full potential. We shouldn't be having breakfast clubs, which are charitable groups, often paid for and organised by teachers whose wages already aren't enough. But we could do something through the schools. We could provide school meals for everyone, out of tax money. And then any kids that didn't want to have them wouldn't have to have them. Food packets is one way of ensuring that people get food, but it's very hard to control for people's allergies or particular issues or problems. The food packets have been provided to vulnerable people here in the UK, but unfortunately the government put it out to private tender, and they were all about saving money. And they took a lot more money than they spent on the packets, which were often within a day or so of going off, contained foods that nobody really wanted and just seemed to be made up from what was available, thrown together without any real consideration or concern for the people at the far end. Food stamps in the US hasn't been a particularly good solution. It became a substitute currency in a lot of ways. But a way might be to nationalise food banks, or to provide distribution automatically to the vulnerable and the poor. Oversight and quality is important, which is why we can't just throw this out higgledy-piggledy to private tender, because as we've seen, that doesn't work. Your life needs to be about more than just shelter, more than just water and food. There needs to be more to it. You need to have access to free money to spend on whatever you want, whether that be more food, better shelter, art, hobbies, crafts, training, again, things that you want. And it's ridiculous to me to see people object to the poor having a mobile phone, which is practically necessary in today's society, or a TV, particularly flat-screen TVs. Try buying something that isn't a flat-screen TV, particularly if you live in very small accommodation. A flat-screen TV is pretty much a necessity. And just because you're poor, you're not allowed to have recreation. You're not allowed to have a break. You're not allowed to have access to the internet, upon which so much is done these days. You're not allowed to have any leisure time, any pleasure whatsoever. That's no way to live. Some small form of luxury is necessary for human flourishing and well-being. And the less stressed you are, the less medical problems you have, and the less cost there is to society overall. So what's the best way to provide these things? Social housing is important. In the UK, we've had a problem since Thatcher's era because the right to buy scheme just sucked the life out of social housing. It was no longer affordable or a good idea or viable, really, for local councils to build social housing, and so the supply has dried up, but the demand keeps climbing. And it's just not worth it to build it. So that would need to be repealed here in the UK, very much so. And it's all very well, people wanting to be homeowners, but you've got to have that spare capacity. We should also help control house prices further on, making everything a bit more affordable for people. That would be a good thing. One way to cut across all of this would be to provide a universal basic income. This is controversial because, generally speaking, it is universal. It is handed out to everybody, and it's a flat amount of money, no matter if you happen to be a millionaire or not. Now, the UK living wage is estimated to be about £9.30 an hour, £10.75 in London. That's about £1,300 to £1,500 a month. That's a considered living wage. The minimum wage is about £8.72 an hour. That's around £1,200 per month. Job seekers allowance, which is what you get when you're out of work, is only about £300 a month for a singleton. The state pension is just over £500 a month. Now, if we took the current total welfare budget in the UK and we split it out between every man, woman and child in the UK, that worked out to about £350 per month per person. So it's somewhere between the pension and the job seekers allowance. So that's not a lot of money at all. But we could just hand that out to everybody, regardless. And we would save an enormous amount on all manner of issues, from bureaucracy to planning, all of it. If we just decided that we were going to do a flat fee out to everybody, that's better than most. And we could certainly afford to raise taxes slightly so that we could pay more to the people that needed more, the disabled, the mentally infirm, people like that. £350 a month seems doable, certainly. And if we paid that to everybody, from the moment you're born, you would hit the age of 18 with £75,000, assuming you didn't have access to all that funds before then. That would certainly pay for a university education for everybody that wanted it, in whatever they wanted. And the thing about UBI is that it doesn't demotivate people. It doesn't stop people working. There was a test in Finland. They paid out about £500 a month. No strings attached. Yeah, so less than half of the UK minimum wage. But that was enough that people were able to start their own businesses. It enabled people to travel and do other things that opened up the opportunities for them to find a job. And it had enormously positive impact on people's mental health and physical health. So again, there's all these other knock-on effects that save a lot of money, that contribute to society beyond what seems to be just an enormous act of state largesse. Yeah, it benefits everyone. And people's objections tend to be that somehow this robs people of motivation, that this is a handout, that it goes to the undeserving as well as the deserving. This doesn't appear to be true. Whenever universal basic income has been trialled, it hasn't led to that massive demotivation. It hasn't led to people just vegging out and not doing anything. It's led to innovation and risk-taking, job seeking, creating their own jobs, doing what they love, as a side hustle or a side business, knowing that they have that basic security to fall back on. So the overall effect has been very positive, and the negative effect hasn't really been seen. And so what if 1 in 100 people are layabouts who don't do anything, so long as everybody else is doing something? And even if someone is lazy, useless, worthless to you, does that mean they should die? That they should starve? That they should be forced? I don't really think that it does. Money redistributed in this way helps the whole economy. Because when you move money from the top to the bottom, that money gets spent. It fuels economic activity. Whereas at the higher levels, it tends to get squirreled away and doesn't do anything for a long time. People on the lower end of the scale tend to spend more of their money proportionally. And so much of what you spend out helping the poor will end up being recaptured as tax or recaptured by companies in any case, driving the economy, creating more jobs. The overall effect is extremely positive. So we should be able to agree on this societal flaw, that nobody should be homeless, that nobody should go hungry, that everyone should have access to clean water, that everyone should have some access to leisure, luxury, comfort. Where we set that bar is where the disagreement seems to be. But we could certainly afford to pay everyone the equivalent of job seekers allowance, £300 a month, regardless, no strings. And the overall effect would be very, very positive. We know that social investment drives down crime. We know that social investment increases health, increases mental health, and therefore decreases costs related to those. So you save money on crime, you save money on health, you give people an opportunity to get back up off the floor, and that seems to be what happens with the majority of people in the Finnish housing system. If you believe in equal opportunity, then you have to invest in education, and that has massive knock-on effects to the positive, as does providing nutrition. So ensuring that children get fed, maybe at schools, is also a massive benefit to society as a whole. But we have to take action to make it happen, and the only practical way that we have to take action to make it happen is collectively. It's through taxation. And this isn't theft. It's part of the social contract. Put yourself in that position. What would you want the world to be like if you were at the bottom? Would you like to have the most equal opportunity possible as anyone else to succeed in life? Or should you just be cast aside because you happen to be born into a poor family in a poor area? And as I say, we know what works. We have the examples, primarily from the Scandinavian nations, but by no means only them, of what we can do and how it pays off if we socially invest. Health, education, shelter, these are things we can provide in an extremely cost-effective way because we save a huge amount of money when we do. But some people would rather see good people suffer rather than see bad people prosper, even if the proportions are out of whack. And that's something I'll never really be able to wrap my head around, that you would rather punish a whole bunch of people, including the innocents, rather than helping a whole bunch of people, including the bad people. One of my favourite statistics, which I trot out all the time, is that at least once, the cost to pursue benefit fraud in the UK has outstripped the actual proven cost of benefit fraud. So we would have saved more money by not pursuing people who were defrauding the system. And yet, the idea of just letting it go, people can't accept. Is this a human psychology thing? Am I not human because I don't see it that way? Who knows? But we do know what works. So then the question becomes, why don't we do it? If it's effective, and for the fiscal conservatives out there, if it saves money, If it costs less overall, if we save money in other areas by investing it in these areas, why don't we do it? Why are you against it? Don't you believe in equal opportunity? And why are you willing to let children starve, or go uneducated, or homeless people to die on the streets, or addicts to go untreated? Why is all of that acceptable when hardly anyone ever defrauds the system? And you're willing to let all those people suffer just because some people are cheats? Explain that to me.